Look in the mirror. What do you see? More specifically, who do you see? Sure, you're seeing skin, nose, eyes, mouth, shoulders, hair. You're seeing your physical characteristics, your physical features. But are these you? On today's episode, we are going to be asking ourselves that question specifically, who are you? You're listening to the Stressless Guru podcast, where we stress less and live more. All music is original works composed and recorded by the Stressless Guru. Friends, family, fellow wanderers, welcome to Studio Zen. This is the Stressless Guru podcast. I am the Stressless Guru, and on my podcast, I like to look at life through a different lens, examine the world around us, and try to focus on the bigger picture that we so often tend to overlook. When we look at the mirror and we see our reflection, whether we're looking in a mirror, we're looking at a puddle of water, we see our reflection, or going back to my very first episode, when you're looking at the bottom of your coffee mug and you see that face staring back at you, are we actually looking at us? Are we seeing ourselves? You know, this is something that perhaps I'm the only person that's ever done this, but when I was a kid, I did this all the time. Even as an adult, I find myself, I'll look at myself in the mirror and I will try to move my eyes and be able to see my eyes moving in the mirror. Now, if I take a recording of myself, yes, I can see my eyes moving back and forth, but I've never actually been able to, in real time, be able to see my eyes move in the reflection. It's kind of weird. And then if you let that play with your mind, you start to wonder, okay, well, I can't see my eyes move. I mean, clearly they're moving because what I'm seeing is changing. But are they? What are my eyes seeing? Oh, are my eyes lying to me about what the movement? I don't know. It gets weird. It gets weird. Again, I'm probably the only person that has these like mini existential crises, looking at myself in the mirror, wondering, okay, well, what is this that I'm looking at? We are, you and I, if we remember back to 6th grade science class, we are made up of a bunch of little tiny components. Cells, nerves, neurons. And in fact, we are, on average, made up, depending on your size, we're made up of anywhere between 28 and about 36 trillion cells. And the fascinating thing about those cells is when you really look closely. Now, I said at the intro, I'm all about looking at the big picture, but sometimes you got to look at the really, really small details before you can step back and appreciate the grandness of everything. So if you zoom in and you look at those cells, cells are very interesting because our bodies, when I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I am seeing a collection of approximately, I'm probably closer to the 36 trillion cells, but I'm seeing all of these cells holding hands, functioning as one organism. But if you look at an individual cell, you isolate the cell, it has its own little protective layer. It has its own metabolism. It reproduces. It consumes. It has its own energy source. It has the ability to communicate with other cells. And then, after it has lived its life, done its thing, that cell will eventually no longer be able to reproduce, and it will die, and it will either be flushed out of the body or it's going to be sloughed off and float away. And you and I will never even think about those little cells that lived their best life, keeping us protected from the outside forces, germs, weather, whatever it might be. Those individual living organisms that all come together to make a body. When one of those dies, you don't even think about it until you're dusting your bookshelf and you're like, oh my gosh, this place needs to be cleaned more than it does. You're cleaning your skin cells. Part of you and the people that you live with, your animals, whatever, settle onto the surfaces. You don't even think about it. You just sweep them away, brush them away. But that's part of you. Or is it? Are those individual cells really who you are? Or are you something completely different? And this is something that I like to think about. This is something I ponder on and wonder for hours upon end. Maybe not quite hours upon end. Well, I suppose you could say. I mean, I put a lot of thought into who we are, what makes us us. As a philosopher, I am absolutely obsessed with asking these kinds of questions. Observing them, playing devil's advocate. What other way can you approach the question of who are we? You see, I can control my hands. I can control my feet. I can control where I move. I can control the pace at which I'm breathing. I can open my eyes, close my eyes, move my eyes. If something happens, I can consciously look over at whatever's happening that has got my attention. I am in control. Kind of. Because you see, there are things that your body does that you don't think about. When I consume food, I don't tell myself I need to digest this food right now. I mean, there's sometimes Thanksgiving, I'm absolutely like the cheerleader for my digestive system, but it's going to do its own thing. I can't necessarily speed it up or slow it down. My heart beats at its own rhythm. If I try to hold my breath long enough, I might pass out. But as soon as I am no longer in control, the body takes over on its own and starts the breathing process for me. So while I have control over myself, I don't really. Myself will take over if I'm trying to fight it. If there's things I'm wanting it to do, if I get sick, I can't command my body to fight the infection. It will do it on its own, and it will have varying degrees of success, depending on where I am and the health of the rest of my body. But when it's fighting those diseases, when it's digesting the food, when it's regulating my body temperature, when it's keeping my heart beating at a normal rhythm, that's not stuff I think about. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. My body is set up to automatically do these things. When I go to sleep at night, I basically flip the switch off. I'm like, I call going to bed time traveling because I close my eyes in one moment and then open my eyes in another moment. The only thing that's really changed is maybe the position that I'm in the bed and the numbers on my clock. I am not consciously aware of the passage of time once I have shut my unit down. Now, I might dream, but even in the dream, I'm not consciously aware of the passing of time. It happens. Sometimes in the dreams, it feels like weeks have gone by. Especially when you have those sleeps, and I'm sure we've all had them, where you're either sitting in a chair or you're laying down in bed and you blink your eyes. I will never forget. I was probably 13 years old, and I went up into my room, sat down on my bed, leaned up against the wall, and it was probably noon. Like, it was bright and sunny. I blinked my eyes. The sun was setting, and because of the way the light was coming into the room, I couldn't tell if it was morning, if it was evening. I didn't know what day it was. I blinked my eyes. Time had passed, and hours had gone by. To me, I just blinked. I wasn't necessarily in control of what was going on with me in that moment. So then I ask you again, who are we? Are we the physical body? And I would say to you, I don't necessarily believe that we are. I feel where I come from, my way of thinking, I should say, is that who you are and who I am are beings of divinity. We are spiritual beings living in a biological mech suit that's good for approximately 80 years, give or take. And then once that mech suit breaks down, is no longer able to repair itself, the mechanics can't repair it any longer for us, then we will jettison that biological mech suit. We don't stick around after it is no longer inhabitable. And here's the thing. Oftentimes, we don't think in these dynamics of the person that you are is not the body, but the soul. Yet when you look at a person and you see them as a being of divinity, as a soul, we'll just go with the soul, living inside a biological mechanical suit with nerves and blood vessels and skin and bones and muscles. We control this to an extent. But who we are and what we project to the world, what we show the world, can be two completely different things. Think about this. We spend billions of dollars a year to adorn, modify, beautify, moisturize this skin that we live in. Makeup, hair, clothes, jewelry. All we're doing is marketing the packaging that we have been given. What we are wearing, what our souls have put on for the next 80 years, give or take. That's at birth. I certainly hope I don't have 80 years left. We are deciding every day how we want to market ourselves. For instance, if you could see me, now if you're watching this on YouTube, you can very clearly see me, but if you're just listening to the audio podcast, you're just hearing my voice. If you could see me, I've got a decent beard. I put some effort into growing a nice beard. I'm bald. That was completely by choice. I was out working out and I'm so hot. Just shave the head, man. I haven't looked back. One of the greatest things I did, shaving the head, just cooled me off immediately. But I've tailored my look. I live in the state that I live in. My city is in the top 1% of crime and violence for my state. It is not a safe place to live. So when I go out of my house, even to walk the dog, I need to look like someone you don't want to mess with. The beard helps. The shaved head helps. I made sure when I go to the gym to work on my shoulders and my chest to make it look like I'm a big buff dude as best as I can. I want to project an image of don't mess with this guy. walk around. I've got, the clothing that I pick out, depending on where I'm going, the situation. I will wear specific articles of clothing, specific pieces of jewelry, because I'm wanting to convey a specific idea to the people around me. Those who can see me, I want to create an image for them. And what's nice about this is if you are consciously aware, this is going to sound weird, but just go with me. If you're consciously aware of biases that people have, stereotypes that people hold, you can actually use those to your advantage. If you know, okay, guys that look like they're part of a biker gang are tough dudes, and you can pull off the look of a biker gang guy, then people aren't going to mess with you. And you're going to come across as this big, tough guy. I remember years ago, I was going to a concert, and my children were very young. And four of the guys that were going to the concert were, I would say, easily the shortest one of us was 6'3". They looked like they could be professional linebackers for the National Football League. Big, rough-looking guys. To know them, they're all sweethearts. Every single one of them, just teddy bears. But we know in a group that people see us and don't want to mess with us because we look like guys that would not be easy to mess with. And my kids were like, Dad, it was great because before they knocked on the door, I didn't even know they were here yet. Before they knocked on the door, they all arrived together and they were smoking a cigarette before they came in because they didn't want to smoke in the house. And my kids came absolutely terrified. Dad, there's these guys and they're on the porch and they're big and scary. And I'm like, oh my goodness, those are the guys I'm going to my concert with. The kids never met them. And because we really just only hang out to go to see, go to concerts. And so they projected an image that looked rough and tough. But who they really were not these rough and tough guys. They were very gentle, kind individuals who were then able to project this image out into the world. When you looked at them, you're like, I'm not going to mess with them. But to actually talk with them, they're great guys. Very, very, very kind individuals. Another friend of mine was he was a Marine, and he and I were talking once about some of his jobs after leaving the service, and he's like, yeah, he wasn't a bodyguard. He was a bouncer. I believe he was a bouncer someplace. And he was telling me about this one incident where somebody was getting up in his face. He's like, I'm a Marine. I gotta look tough. And he's like, this guy kept getting in my face. And I just kept thinking, man, let's not do this. Let's not do this. He's like, and you gotta, stare him down, put on that tough exterior. But on the inside, he's like, man, my heart was beating. Like, I don't want to do this. Let's not get physical here. Just back down and walk away. And nothing came of it. The person, he stood his ground and the person backed off. But it's projecting these personas. We wear clothing. We put on, I don't put on makeup, but people put on makeup. People do their hair because they want the world to see a specific image when they encounter that physical form. But what's interesting is when that person starts to talk, when you start to interact with that person, who they really are, who their soul is, can be a very, very different version than the visual person that you're looking at. For instance, some of the most attractive people, the most beautiful people I have ever met, not all of them, but some of them, have had some of the most ugly souls I have ever met. I call these people beautiful monsters because to look at them, you're like, wow, that is a very attractive person. And then they start to talk. You start to interact with them, and you're like, wow, that is a very bad person. They're good to look at, but actually having a conversation, just not something that you want to do. So what is it? Are we looking at the exterior of the person? Or are we looking at the inside of the person, who they really are? Because what you see on the surface is just what they have carefully curated. It could just be that they're, this is the big thing, at least where I live, everybody goes out in their pajamas now. I've seen more pajamas than I've seen other articles of clothing whenever I've gone out to the store. I'm out in public. Everybody seems to be walking around in these flannel pajama pants, which is fine. It's kind of what everybody's wearing now, but that's what they're wanting to project to everybody. Hey, I'm happy-go-lucky, carefree. I don't really give 2 cents about what you think of me, so I'm not going to dress in anything more than these Care Bear pink fluffy pajama pants. I don't know. That's what I got. I've recently saw multiples of these Care Bear pajama pants, so that I guess that's where my mind was pulling from. But then you have a conversation with a person, and you get a mixed bag. Some of them are very interesting individuals. Some of them you're like, yep, that I get the whole Care Bear thing. That's you. You're just projecting who you truly are. And some of us do that. There are very, very beautiful people whose souls are as equally gorgeous as they are. They're full of joy. They're the ones that attract everybody. You can't help but be happier when you're with that person. But see, here's the problem with that. A lot of times, especially when we're younger, we're drawn to what we see. The visuals are there. And if we find somebody to be visually pleasing, then it's easy to develop feelings for that individual. But looks fade over time. In fact, looks can fade within the same day, depending on what the person's wearing, if they've got their hair done, if they're wearing makeup. The person that you're looking at now, once they go and wash everything off and change into their loungewear for the home, can look completely different than who they present at work, out in public. But then over time, all of us do change. Those looks that attracted us initially might start to fade. So it becomes real important, especially in courtship, that when we are finding somebody, the physical attraction is very important. I'm not trying to discount what we're marketing ourselves as to people, what we're trying to, the face we're showing to people. But we have to know, it's important to remember that what I'm visibly seeing in front of me isn't actually who that person is. It's just where that person is living. It's getting to know who is inside that body. What is that soul's story? And if you can change your mindset, change your perspective, and start to see people for who they are and not what's on the outside. And listen, I can change my shirt, I can grow a beard, I could grow my hair out. Well, I don't know if I can grow it out now, but I used to be able to grow my hair out. The way I look, I can alter to some degree. There are things about me I cannot change. My eye color, my skin color. I guess I could dye my beard. I respect it too much. I would never put dye in my beard. But we can change some of the physical features that we have. Some of them that's what we were born with. That's what we have. So we need to make the best of what we've got. But we have to also understand that what we are living in isn't actually us. If I was to be in an accident and lose my arm, or something happened and I lost one or both of my legs, I'm no less a person than I was prior to that accident. I'm still me. I still have thoughts, emotions, wants, desires, fears. So what makes me me isn't the body. And I would have to argue that it's not the mind either. And this is kind of going a little bit deeper than I wanted to go today, but we'll go there because it's kind of how I'm feeling. One could argue that we are our mind. The mind is where thoughts are processed, where thoughts are created. I would argue that, though. I don't feel like the brain, the mind, is any more who we are than the clothes that we wear. To me, the person is three parts. You've got the mind, you've got the body, and you've got the soul. The body is the physical tool that the soul uses to interact with a physical world. As a being of divinity, as a spiritual being, I need to have some tool to interact with the world that I am currently inhabiting. And this body that I am in does that for me. My thoughts, my fears, my emotions, my memories, they're the soul. The soul holds on to those things. My thoughts, the soul. My fears, my intuitions, the soul. The mind is the control mechanism, the computer, if you will, the control center for the soul to use the body. We've got nerves all over our bodies that send signals to the brain. Then the soul understands the readouts that it's getting and can respond accordingly. And we have diseases that can actually attack the mind. Dementia, Alzheimer's disease, where the mind starts to physically deteriorate inside the skull. And yet, even in those diseases, the individual, the soul that is living inside that body, that is starting to fail and break down, from time to time will have what we call lucid moments, moments of lucidity, where they may not have recognized you, they may not have understood where they were or what was going on in 1 minute, and then nothing has happened in the mind, but instantly they know exactly what's going on, where they are, who you are. They can tell you what's happening to their body, how they feel. They understand everything. And then that moment passes. The brain didn't temporarily heal itself. The soul was able to find another connection to communicate to the other souls around it in those moments of lucidity. As the control mechanism glitches out, as it fails, the soul can still find a way. And then eventually, once the body is no longer able to be inhabited, as I said earlier, the soul will jettison. What we are then left with, the brain is still there. The heart, the lung, the person is still there as we know them, but they're no longer functioning. Their unit is no longer capable of sustaining the soul. And then all the materials, the little miniature building blocks that created that biological mech suit will, over time, break down become organic matter to then once again be recycled through the system. Just a thought. I would be curious to know what your thoughts on this are. But here's a problem. People are very simple creatures. And a lot of us, go back and listen to my previous podcast on the 70-30, a lot of us are easily led, our thoughts easily swayed. And because visually recognizing something about somebody is a survival mechanism, there are people who, understanding psychology, use visual cues to control us, often to divide us. Think about color for a minute. When I'm walking down the street and I've got my jersey on and it's got my favorite team's colors, and I see you wearing your favorite team's colors, if our teams are rivals, I immediately have thoughts about you as a person. I grew up in a family that was very into a football team called the Cincinnati Bengals. And our big rival team was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when I would go to work and see people on game day in their Steeler jersey, I would just, it would just eat at me like, oh, you're one of those people. I was much younger then. Now, as a mature adult man, I do not follow sports. It's just not my thing. But when I was young, teens, early 20s, I was very passionate about my sports teams. So I've been there. I know what it's like to see somebody in that other jersey. Great friends. We're great friends any day other than when it's game day. And then it's like, oh, you're on that side of the fence. But it's not just jerseys. It's the clothes we wear. Think about when you see somebody wearing their culture's clothing. How does it make you feel? Respectful, irritated, appreciative, curious. When you see somebody else's flag displayed on their uniform, when you see somebody's skin color, their eye color. There was I want to say I don't recall what grade she taught, but it was a teacher years and years ago who did an experiment where she separated her class, people with brown eyes versus people with blue eyes, the students. It was an elementary school, very young children. Very, very interesting experiment that she did to treat one group differently than she treated the other group, just based on eye color. And even those kids started treating each other differently. And I want to say that the brown eyes were the ones that she was, hyping up as like the superior eye color. And the blue eyes were like, you can't trust the blue-eyed people. I don't recall. You'd have to go back and look it up. I'm kind of riffing here off of memories of studies that I've done. But what she found is something as minute as eye color and talking one group up over the other actually changed the dynamic of the classroom, of the individuals. The ones who were kind of discouraged and put down actually took on a victim mentality. The day before, everybody was fine. They all got along. They played together on the playground. But once she started initiating her little experiment, the two groups wouldn't mingle. They would separate. And people in authority still use this same mentality against us. And there's a lot of us who are those that will judge a book by its cover and will only see what's on the outside of a person. You've got curves in all the right places. You've got the body type that's attractive. It doesn't matter what your personality is like. As long as you got all the right attractive features, that's all some people are looking for. But then for the long-term relationship, which in some instances they're not going for anyway, but you got to see past the surface. You got to see past what the eyes can perceive. Because if you get stuck on looking at just what's on the outside, you completely miss the actual person that is in front of you. You have those beautiful monsters. Very, very attractive individuals who, once you start talking to them, you're like, wow, you're a bad person. Again, the flip side, there are people who are not classically attractive, who are some of the most beautiful humans I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Again, that's not to say everybody that looks a specific way acts a specific way. That is not at all true. But that's the point. You have to get to know what is beyond the exterior of that person. Think about this for a moment. Once your biological mech suit breaks down to the point where you're no longer capable of operating it, it's no longer capable of sustaining you, the soul, you will leave. And once you leave, we'll talk about where we go at a different podcast. But once you leave, what we have left is that mech suit. We'll dress it up. Sometimes we'll put it in a little box, depending on what our funeral arrangements might be. And people will stand up and talk about memories that they had with the individual that they are there to celebrate. Most of the time, because I've been to several funerals, most of the time, actually I would say of all the funerals I've ever been to, I can't honestly say anybody focused on the occupation of the individual or what that person looked like. While the eulogy is taking place, we're hearing things about they made everybody smile. They told the funniest jokes. They were there to support so-and-so when they were down, or whatever it is that the person is eulogizing about. They're talking about the soul, not the visual representation of the person, but the actions, the emotions, the feelings people got interacting with that soul. And that's who we are. In those eulogies, in those memories that we have of our friends, when I think back at my friends, I'm not thinking about their physical bodies. I mean, I can visualize in my mind what they look like. But when I want to hang out with my friends, I'm not wanting to hang out with my friend's body. I'm wanting to hang out with the soul, with the emotions, with the feelings, with the intellect. You could take that soul and put it into any body. And that's what I would want. I would want to see and experience that soul. The packaging that soul is wearing really doesn't matter all that much in the big scheme of things, because that packaging changes. When I was in my teens, I was a skinny, fit little guy. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I kind of let myself go. I was a parent, working full-time, going to school full-time, married. I got the dad bod thing going on. Now I'm trying to reverse it, go back to how I looked in my teens. A little bit more of a muscular fit than when I was in my teens, but we can change the way we look. But it's a lot harder to change the core, the emotions, the inflections that somebody brings, the attitudes that are brought. And those are the things that are actually who we are. Because once the soul is no longer in the body is just a shell. Think about this. Well, I'll kind of leave it at this because I'm going a little bit longer than I wanted to go. I've kind of gotten off on a couple little tangents here. I'm going to get off on another one for just a second. Think about this. Because this has happened to me. I'm sure I'm not the only person that this has happened to. Think about a time. Again, it may or may not have ever happened to you. But I know distinctly there have been times where I have heard somebody speak. I couldn't see where the voice was coming from. And when I could see where the voice was coming from, I didn't know the person. I visually had no recollection of that person. But hearing them speak, the way they were, the inflections they put in their words, the spacing, the way they were laughing, whatever it was, something about that voice on the other side of the room, I immediately felt like that person was a very interesting person I needed to get to know. I felt kinship with a disembodied voice floating through the air. I don't know who that voice belongs to, but I need to find that person and just shake their hand, figure out who they are, because there is something about that voice that is familiar to me. And I believe that we as divine beings are able to sense other divine beings that we have these deep connections to, those familial ties. And it doesn't matter what packaging that soul is in, that's a soul that is familiar to me. And so to sit down and have a conversation, hey, and look, I'm all about the whole reincarnation thing, and I hope that doesn't offend anybody. I've got reasons for my belief in reincarnation. I'll absolutely be getting into that in later podcasts. But I believe that as souls, we are timeless beings, and we can go through numerous lifetimes. And there are specific groups of souls that can recognize one another. We call these soulmates. Again, I'll talk about those at a different time as well. And a soulmate isn't specifically like your one true love partner for all time. It's not one person. You have multiple soulmates, males and females. It has nothing to do with reproducing with that individual. It has everything to do with we are part of a larger whole. And hearing that voice, you're like, I don't know that person, but I know that person. And I want to see and talk to and get to know their story because my soul recognizes who that person is. Never seen them before, don't know anything about them, don't know if they got a family, doesn't matter. My soul recognizes them because we, at the core of everything that we are beings of divinity. We have to remember that. Whenever we're going out in public and you see somebody and what you visually see about that person, you like, you don't like, you're indifferent to, whatever it is, recognize the fact that inside that shell, whatever it is you're seeing about the person, inside of that person is a being of divinity. And it is that being of divinity living inside their little temple that we need to respect as a fellow divine being. Might not agree with what they have to say. Their experiences are going to be vastly different than some of our experiences, and that's okay. We all have our own journey to go on. But we need to recognize that within each one of us, deeper than what we see on the outside, deeper than our clothes, deeper than our skin, the core being inside this shell is divine. That's who we really are. Not these 28 to 37 trillion cells holding hands. The divine spark. The divine being, the divine essence, the soul. That is who you are. And instead of spending billions of dollars making up our shell, what we should really be doing is focusing inward on who we are and making that the beautiful version of ourselves. Not visibly, but that person that people look to for hope, for comfort, for trust. That person that I can tell you anything, and I know I'm not going to be judged because you've got a good soul. All right. That's what I got. In the comments, listen, wherever you're watching this, there's a comment section, I promise. I know where all my podcasts are going. I know where all my videos are going. You can leave me comments. I want to know your thoughts on this. Let's have a conversation. Friends, family, fellow wanderers, if this podcast has helped you stress a little less, think a little different, or feel a little less alone, then it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't. In this space, we are all welcome to be who we are. And I'm glad you're here. If you're listening to the audio-only version of this podcast, the full video version is also available on YouTube. You just have to search for The Stress Less Guru. Wherever you're headed, truly know that there is no need to rush. I am the Stress Less Guru, and until next time, stress less and live more.